All right, so thank you for coming. A bit about myself. So I'm Arnaud Porterie, which surprisingly is French, but I happen to be living in Amsterdam. Today, I'm the founder of a company called Echoes, which helps engineering manager get the best of their teams. Before that, I was a deputy CTO in a large company called VP, which some of you may know. Before that, again, I was running the open source project at Docker, which I'm sure everyone here knows. So today, I'll be talking about topics like developer productivity, like engineering success. Why are we talking about those things a lot these days? And is all the noise really justified? So developer productivity, a hot topic, sure, but is it for good reasons? Unless you've been living under a rock for the past couple of years, you probably heard a lot about the topic of developer productivity. We've had popular researchers with Dora, with Space, and many others. We've had controversial topics and controversial posts also, like the McKinsey article that some of you may have read a couple months ago. We have a flood of over-promising startups, products, solutions, et cetera, What is really super interesting in this context is that yet this is the time where developers have been the most productive ever. Like, when you look at things today, like we have pretty impressive tools, pretty impressive frameworks. We have AI assistants. Like, we've never been so productive, and yet everybody's talking about the problem of developer productivity. So why is that so? I think developer productivity is really the tree that hides the forest. What's happening these days is that expectations toward tech only keeps growing. We are, unfortunately, in a trend of ongoing downsizing, and cost-cutting. Boards and investors are demanding more visibility into the performance of the teams. They want to see that they are getting value for their money, essentially. We are constantly asked to do more with less. And at the same time, accountability of tech is not so much catching up. There's still a perception that our function is pretty opaque. And there's some truth to it. Like, when you're not an engineer, understanding what engineers are doing and whether they're doing the right thing is not actually trivial. You know, when we're talking about concepts like technical debt and things like this, it's not easy to grasp when you're not actually in the field. And the result is that the CEOs, well, they don't know if the CTO is doing well. And the truth is that the CTOs themselves, they don't always know whether they're doing well. What I think is that those expectations that keep growing and this accountability that doesn't really catch up is creating a situation that is really untenable. And generally, our inability to measure success, measure engineering success, has become untenable. And I think the reason why we're talking about developer productivity so much these days is because it offers one answer, maybe not the best, but one answer to the question, are we doing well? But keeping in mind that as an answer, well, it's not that great. Like, engineering productivity is not the bottleneck to most organizations. And I'm not going to do a show of hands because it's a big room, but I have yet to see organizations that tell me the biggest of our problem is the productivity of our developers. I hear things about like the clarity of goals, the goals that are changing constantly, about the fact that there's competing priorities, sure. But like developer productivity is our topmost problem, not so much. And the other thing is, it only captures a very narrow aspect of success, because the most performant team doesn't necessarily mean that they have the most sustainable business. All right? So what is really engineering success? How do we define it? How do we measure it? Well, first, we have to recognize that there's many shapes to software development. It is inherently complex. We are juggling between priorities. We have to coordinate teams for cross-teams effort. We have to manage software rot. And at the same time, we have to continue shipping value for our business. Like, that's only just the tip of the iceberg in terms of the difficulty of producing software at scale in our industry today. So how do we believe that there is going to be a single metric that can capture this all? I don't think it can possibly exist. And additionally, software development is contextual. It varies based on the sector. Like, for example, one of our big tech companies is very famous for saying that we should move fast and break things. Well, yes, you can move fast and break things when you're a social network. I don't recommend moving fast and breaking things when you're in healthcare or in the industry. And it also depends on the business maturity, right? There's been strategic iterations in our business. There's been acquisitions. There's been mergers. There's been all those things that mean that we don't do software in our particular company like we do in our neighbor. And maybe they're in the same space. Maybe they have similar sizes. Maybe there's a lot of things that may look like the same from the outside. But the truth is, software development is heavily contextual. And that means that benchmarks as a measure of success is also a difficult thing to do. Like, how are you going to compare your own pace with the pace of your neighbor? Again, very different contexts, very different problems, right? The truth is that success is very relative. And if there's no universal measure of engineering success, the best thing we can do is just measure the gap between what we are and what we could be, given our context, given our constraints, given our history. In other words, are we the best version of ourselves? The talk before mine was a talk about engineering management, and I think this is really one of the key questions that engineering managers should be asking themselves constantly. Like, is my team the best version of itself? What is it that we could do better? What is it that we could do differently? And yet, there's things that pretty much all engineering organizations have in common. For example, we don't necessarily know what success looks like, but somehow we all know what failure looks like. We all know that a team that ships nothing or the wrong things is in trouble, right? We all know that development pace being slow doesn't look good. We know that the low quality of output also doesn't look good. When churn is high, developers are leaving, people are unhappy, like those are signals that we know to recognize as problems. And also, the mission statement itself is pretty much universal. As much as different engineering teams may be, we kind of are working for the same reason, which is delivering value for the business frequently and sustainably. And I think that's enough of a frame so that we can discuss engineering success and think about engineering success more universally. What I suggest is that there's really three components to engineering success coming from this mission statement that are reasonably universal. The first one is alignment. Are we putting our efforts in the right place? Simple as that. The second one is delivery performance. Are we delivering software efficiently? And that is where questions of developer productivity may arise. The third one is health. Are we creating a context favorable to durable success? What's interesting about these components of engineering success is that none of them can be neglected, or at least not for too long. Without alignment, essentially your efforts don't really matter. It means that you are not creating value and that you're just running to stay in place. Without delivery performance, eventually progress will halt. Why? Because you're not investing in the platform. You're not doing the things that are required for delivery to be sustainable. And without a healthy environment, the results won't last, either because people are going to be leaving or just because they're going to be disengaged. Now, the balance between those three components, they will vary over time. And as usual, they are going to vary with the context, because different teams are going to value different things. There's successful companies that are extremely happy shipping partially finished products, assuming that it's going to be, polished once it's in production. And that's fine. Like, who are we to criticize that? And on the other hand, you have companies that don't really care about this. They just want to ship things fast. They want to ship the perfect thing, and they will take the time it takes to do it. And again, who are we to say whether that's the right approach for them? So let's go over those different components. The first one is alignment. Are we putting our efforts in the right place? Arguably, I think this is one of the most important in the current era. Why? Because, well, in a post-COVID world, work is very much distributed. And that means that the balance between autonomy and alignment has shifted pretty significantly in the past couple of years. Even companies that were extremely well known for granting developers a huge level of autonomy, they had to revise this after COVID to ask for more alignment toward business goals and to make sure that, sure, people had autonomy in the way that they were doing their work, but they were expected to spend most of their time on things that were really mandated by the company. The other point is that the ability to hire is limited in our current economic context. And that means that we cannot afford more than any time before to work on things that don't matter as much as the main business drivers. And the third point is that the product engineering model is a de facto standard. So what I call the product engineering model here is basically organizations where you have a separate engineering and product functions, usually with design, that work and collaborate together on the priorities and the roadmaps. And that means that there's not a single stakeholder on the roadmap anymore. You need people to be aligned. You need people to understand collectively what is it that they should be doing first and foremost between features, between the technical roadmap, and between all those topics. That requires some clarity and some reasonable stability of goals, but it also requires shared incentives. Like you know that alignment is going to be broken as soon as you have engineering and product, for example, who are competing for their part of the roadmap. That's not how it's supposed to work. You need to have collaboration. One of the concrete examples that I've done in one of my previous jobs is making sure that the objectives of both product and engineers were shared, meaning that engineers were incentivized on business results in the same way that product managers were incentivized on the stability of the platform. It's a very hard pill to swallow for most of the people involved, but I think it's for the best. How do you measure alignment? Well, the best way to do this is just to connect everyday work to purpose and to measure how work is distributed across the organization and understanding what efforts are contributing to. It's easier said than done. I've done this manually when I was running a large team, and it's a nightmare. But it makes a whole lot of difference for the teams. Why? Because that means that you have now a tool that you can use for the teams to show how their contributions participate into the bigger picture and into the company strategy. But most importantly, it helps to explain to leadership what it is that we're doing as an organization, which is probably one of the top questions that CEO are asking right now regarding the budget of tech and how it's being used. The second component of engineering success is delivery performance. So again, this is where we're going to talk about the things that are about developer productivity, DORA metrics, this kind of things. I'm going to focus first and foremost on the major issues that I'm seeing with them, and most importantly, how I'm seeing them misused in a lot of organizations. Delivery performance metrics, they belong to the teams as a tool for continuous improvement and operational excellence. Somebody on my team was doing the parallel with like those Fitbit trackers and things like this that you want to use for self-improvement when you're running or this kind of things. This is where I see delivery performance metrics, not as the main measure of a team's success, not as a KPI used to communicate with leadership. Why? Because if you're using them as the main measure of team success, you're basically saying the one thing that we expect from you is to go fast, regardless of the direction. Just go fast. Ship software. And that also creates an incentive to over-engineer, over-optimize, over-tweak everything that can be, such that you're going to ship software extremely fast, extremely often, but that probably doesn't solve any business problem. It should also not be used as a way to communicate with leadership, because if you use things like DORA metrics and delivery performance metrics to the leadership, you're essentially saying that this is how you want to be evaluated, right? This is like saying that, well, this is my metric of success. I want to be challenged on this. So if you're telling your CEO tomorrow that you've shipped 100 pull requests this month, next month, if you show that you shipped 89, pull requests, the first question you're going to get is, well, where's the 15 other coming? And why are we missing 15 pull requests? Who cares? Who cares? This is not what we're paid for. The other thing about delivery performance metrics, and that's true for all metrics, they are only valuable when they drive actions. However, one problem that I'm seeing a lot is that people often underestimate the gap between putting numbers in a dashboard or a spreadsheet and expecting some behavior change. You're not going to change the culture by putting numbers on a dashboard, unfortunately. It takes a lot more work than this, and especially it takes telling people what to do with them and how they are expected to interact with them. Because many engineering managers, they just don't know what to do with them. Like, we talk a lot about DORA metrics, but the truth is, when I tell you that your lead time is 2.5 days, okay, now what? Is that good? Is that bad? What should I be doing differently? That's all things that engineering managers cannot be expected to have an answer on out of the box. So how to measure them? Well, we have industry standard metrics, so I'm not going to go over them again. I will repeat, however, that it has to be at the team level, always at the team level, and include cross-team collaboration. You don't want to measure, of course, the delivery performance of individual developers, because that doesn't mean much. Software is a team sport, and that's what it is. How you want to use them? So again, exposing them to the teams with clear expectations. Do we have a threshold in terms of delivery frequency that we expect? Do we expect all teams to fall into the same bucket and not have any outliers? What is it that we're supposed to do with them? The third component is health. Are we creating a context favorable to durable success? This is the hardest one to measure because it's a lot more soft. There's going to be things that are reasonably easy to compute, like churn, unusual work patterns, when you have somebody working extremely long hours, working over the weekends, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, you have satisfaction surveys, which are a decent tool to see how the team is doing and whether things are doing well. Again, this component is probably not the one that engineering managers think about first, but it is extremely important because ultimately, you may have perfect alignment to business goals, a 10x team that is delivering software extremely fast. There's not a lot of value in that if people are burning out and that you're going to be left without a team in 6 months, right? So key takeaways are really 3 points. First is our inability to measure engineering success has become untenable. The second one is that developer productivity by itself is a very incomplete measure of success. But it does fill a gap right now by answering the question, are we doing well? What engineering success really takes is a combination of alignment, delivery performance, and health. All those ideas I put into my company, of course, and we have a booth here. I cannot take questions at this time, but I'd be happy to answer them at any point during the day or tomorrow at our booth and show you what we're building. Thank you very much for your time and your attention.